since the beginning, our efforts in Rwanda have focused really on single moms. Sometimes it was the grandmothers raising children, otherwise, and then we became more attuned to the needs of women at all ages raising children. When they have their first, they are marginalized, usually, right out of, or while they're still in high school, marginalized socially and in terms of education. There just isn't any investment made anymore into those moms. And without support, they'll never rise above a crushing amount of poverty and further occasional sexual alliances with some man who will provide some support and help, leads to second birth, and the cycle goes on indefinitely. They've always asked for, when I ask these moms, what do you need most? It's always a roof over our heads. And that single element is what gives them the courage and somehow the stamina to continue to provide for their kids. In beginning of last year, the local authorities came to our team in Rwanda, the 4 or 5 full-time people who work in our NGO, and asked if we could take on a very daunting assignment of repairing the houses of 4 subsistence farmers high up in the mountains in the little village of Raro. And they have asked us before to do houses. We had done 4 houses the previous year down closer in the valley, and had done really just an amazing job of building them from the ground up. In this occasion, these were 4 houses that had been destroyed by a violent windstorm that came up through the canyon up to this mountain town and just tore the roofs and the walls off of these families' houses. Being a subsistence farming group, they just did not have any of the resources to continue. So, as the authorities said to us, no one else, we have promised these families that we would come to their aid, but no one will go so far up into the mountains. No other NGO, no other government agency. It's 13, 14 kilometers up a winding dirt track, rutted road that's almost impassable when it rains. And so we accepted the assignment, but we didn't have any grant in 2019 in Rwanda. And so Jack Petrie stepped in and committed one of the concerts of the Sweet Soul Choir that he leads. And that concert was held on Mother's Day of last year, raised $10,000. $5,000 went to the Cridge Center services for single moms, and $5,000 of it went to the impoverished families in the mountains of Rwanda. Because it was so difficult to get to, we moved our builder team of 4 guys up into the mountains, and they were stationed then 5 days a week in an empty schoolroom. And they took with them their plumb bob, their trowel, machete, and hammer. And that's all they need to build those 4 houses. And they did a marvelous job. They were stuccoed inside and out, which is really a step forward in Rwandan, in the poverty areas of Rwanda. Doors brightly painted, really beautifully done, very solid. When we invited the first father into this house, with the first time in his life he's ever been able to provide furniture for his family. Among the 4 families, there was only one bed among all 4 of them, and a stick bed at that, no mattresses. So we found some more funds and put table and chairs and beds into these houses and mattresses. when the father walked into his house, the father of 5 kids, he stood for a few moments staring at the surroundings inside his house and turned and buried his head in my chest, sobbing. It was the kind of thing that he had always hoped he would do for his family, but had never been able. And there it was. At the center of the beneficiary group was Maria. Maria is an indigenous Batwa pygmy whose people only came out of the mountain jungles in the last generation, maybe 2. And she lived in this house with her severely autistic grandson. Maybe it wasn't even her grandson, only she carries the title everybody gives her of grandmother, but that's often is a generic term for anybody who takes in the needy kids. When I first realized that it was just Mary and her grandson, I told my team, well, you don't really need to build a 5-room house like you do for the other families with kids. Oh, no, they said, no, Mary's got to have a big front room. We don't have a church, so it's Mary's house where we go to pray. So Mary got her big front room. On the day that we turned over all 4 houses in the same fashion that I learned to do in Habitat for Humanity when Nacho and his wife and I worked for Habitat in California, they came from all the mountains, villages all around to see this remarkable thing that someone had come up the mountain and built 4 beautiful houses for 4 poor families. And the head lady of the village, she spoke really very eloquently about how the whole village should take hope because they were not invisible to the rest of the world. There's a village halfway down the mountain, 5 or 6 kilometers down, and it's a little more established, and there's a government office there. And she told the people, she said, it has been our understanding that God never makes it past Kagano. But today, we see with our own eyes that God knows the path even as far as Raro. They were very inspired that we found them so far back in the mountains. Meanwhile, back down in the flatlands where our office is, our headquarters, we were focused on one of our largest beneficiary groups, which is the young unwed mothers. Without a husband, without an education or a vocation, they struggle terrifically to keep themselves out of destitution. And we have adopted large groups of these and just taken it as our vocation to find a path for them, lead them out of this hopeless desperation of field work for $1 a day when they can find it. A year ago, we put together our first training program of 6 months for a group of these moms, and built a sewing training center, and they succeeded very well. So we did it again in December of 2019. The district announced that they had a little bit of extra money, and so we applied for a small grant, $3,000, and put another group of 14 young women into a training program to learn sewing. They progressed along very nicely through January, February, and then by mid-March, in the capital city of Kigali, they experienced their first COVID case, and within 48 hours, they had shut the country down in restrictions that we all know so well. Stay home except for essential needs. of food or health, and all gatherings were forbidden. And so we had to close up the training program, but not before we had delivered 10 new treadle machines, which will become the foundation of their new women's cooperative that will grow and prosper with this new capacity. So that the shutdown hit these young women very, very hard because they're day-to-day workers. And so even when our coordinator of our NGO went to the local hospital and made clear to them that they would be needing personal protective equipment in a very short order, which was an issue that they really hadn't even contemplated and considered. And so it took them a couple of weeks, but they made a decision. Yes, they would accept it if our girls made or fulfilled a contract for 500 masks. So we brought them together again at social distancing, and they learned to make the masks. It didn't make much money, but it gave them a huge boost in confidence. It was a recognition of, for them, of what these new skills, what the solidarity they have with one another as a group, as a co-op, what that opportunity that's going to give them. Yeah. But hunger persisted. And we realized that we had to do something. Or we searched for a way, and our Rotary Club gave us an emergency grant of $1,900. And we used that to provide every one of the 106 unmarried moms that we have in 3 different groups spread over quite a large area. Give them each 2 packages over the course of about 6 weeks of about 12 kilos of flour, sugar, beans, oil, and soap, and to hold them over, maintain that solidarity and that feeling of their being held until they can manage on their own. So that's benefit was just a huge support for their hope and their trust going forward. They will resume their training as soon as the restrictions are lifted, and we hope that'll be soon in Rwanda, because in a country of 11.5 million people, they have less than 300 cases. There were also, we did a survey of all the families, and we found that there were, of the 106, there were 25 that did not have these little victory gardens, these vegetable gardens in the front of their houses. And so we built 25 of them to give them a more sustainable source of their spinach, tomatoes, onions, carrots, peppers. And that group, there are 55 girls, young women, in a unique geographical area that will be the beneficiaries of a new training program that will kick off in September. A training program to provide them through government subsidized vocational training programs, give them access, 20 of them access to 6 months of sewing, 12 access to 6 months of hairdressing training, 12 to shoemaking, 8 have chosen welding, and 5 or 6 or 7 will get a course and a membership in a produce marketing collective. And so we're very much looking forward to seeing that grant that is our own club's $7,000 matching grant that will commence, will be awarded, we trust, in September. And there will be some great, great stories as they all move again towards their own increased level of confidence and their own belief that they alone or with a partner, they will find a life above this wretching poverty that they would have otherwise been restricted to. So those are our stories of the Rotary sponsored activities. There are many other stories about the phenomenal success, the accomplishments that our beneficiaries achieve, like Emmanuel, who went through 3 years of secondary school and then 5 years of university based on his own National Merit Scholarship to graduate in November as a full-fledged physician. The possibilities that they hold within them, if given just a little help, is just amazing. One of them wrote to me recently, one of our graduate students, that he said, until you came, life for us was like a bridge of one log over a wide river. And we fell, and we struggled, and we tried again. And we very often, or very seldom, reached the other side where we would find our dreams. But you have brought a second log. You have brought a third log. And now many of us are able on our own feet to cross over and find our success and our only imagined goals on the other side. So they send their thanks to you 100-fold, because their experience is that they achieve 100-fold.